What's up guys, we are speedrunning 20 new IEMs that I have heard recently. There is a lot, so let's just get into it. Starting with the 7Hz Diablo and the Divine, I didn't have time to make a dedicated video, but basically the Diablo is a very bass centric, low end centric set. If you crank it up enough, if you give it enough scaling, it becomes borderline a bass head set. Very punchy, the deepness in the rumble, the impact, the thickness, the authority. It is very good when it comes to hip hop, rap, EDM, pop, anything that does well with a lot of sub bass, mid bass, even rock. For example, the bass guitars, the kick drums are very satisfying, the slam. Now this does mean the layering, the separation, detail, micro nuances do take a hit. I wouldn't say it's too competitive for the price in terms of technical performance, but again, you're not buying this for the technicalities, you're buying this if you are a bass lover. You want the slam, you want the impact, you want that heavy feeling to the sound. A potential issue if you're looking for something cleaner is the vocals and the treble extension or the detail in the treble. It just doesn't have that much because they are tamer. It's downward tilted, it's cut, it allows the low end to breathe more. You get all the focus and the highlight in the rumble, the bass, the mid bass slam. So the vocals are more pulled back. I would say it's borderline congested on some songs. I definitely wouldn't recommend this if you want a vocal centric set or like a more balanced tuning, when it comes to sound. It's just not very balanced by any means. It is a bassy set that scales very good. Tip wise, any silicone tips are fine. I like the Asla Origins and the Velvet of Venus on them, but you can use pretty much any silicone tips as long as they are not foam tips, because the texture do take a hit if you are using foam tips for the bass. But aside from that, tip roll, whatever fits nice will work very good on the Diablos. Now value wise, the Diablos are okay. I wouldn't say they are a value monster, but if you're looking for a bassy set to a bass head set, these are very enjoyable. I like them a lot when it comes to hip hop, even K-pop. But if you're looking for a technical, very bang for your buck when it comes to performance, you can get better stuff, cheaper stuff like the SIMGOT EA500LM. Even the EW300 is slightly more technical than this. The technicalities on the Diablos fall around the Explore and the S08 levels. They are very similar in that they all scale pretty good. The main difference is that the Diablo is the most bassy and bass headset out of the Explorer and the S08s. So overall, the Diablo is a solid release. I am a bass head, so I do like these. If you're not a bass head, you might think like this is just too bloated, too muddy, etc., whatever. But if you're a bass head, these are pretty solid. I would just wait for these to go on sale because, again, performance wise, they are not as competitive at its price of around $150. Aside from that, the accessory is pretty solid. The cables are very nice. The case is obviously very solid. You get the 7Hz classic rectangle sturdy brick case, and the design is okay. It's a bit dull, a bit boring, but overall I would say it is decent. Half recommendation depending if it goes on sale or not. Moving on, as for the 7Hz Divine, these are the complete opposite tuning of the Diablos. They are clean, balanced, vocals centric. The vocals pop out slightly from the rest of the frequency. You get enough liveliness in the upper mids region. It's not completely like boring and smoothed out like a dead neutral set. I do enjoy these when it comes to vocals, ballads. You got your slower pop stuff, your acoustics, your R&B, your classical instrumentals, the layering, the separation. Overall technical performance is definitely a step up over the Diablos. Now this doesn't mean that the Divine is a value monster like the Super Mix 4, the Nova Chopin. I would say this is slightly behind them, like just slightly behind them, but they are tuned to be more enjoyable to me personally because the Harman counterparts are just a bit shouty. Now if you are a bass lover or if you want an IEM that has a good amount of sub bass boost, the Divine is not the set for you. The Diablos will probably be the better fit. It just doesn't have that much low end impact. Like the separation, the quickness, the K is very good. It doesn't have too much bloat, no bloat actually, no bleeding into the mids. It's very tame when it comes to the low end, but because it is very tame, it also means that you don't get the deep rumbly, the heavy slam when it comes to the drums, the sub bass. I wouldn't really use the Divine when it comes to rock, hip hop, rap, very low end heavy stuff. For rock, for example, the vocals pop out just a little bit too much because you don't have enough low end to balance it out, and because it just has a bit more emphasis in the upper mids, and the treble isn't also as airy as I would like for rock and metal. So this is more of a neutral clean set with a vocal presence, whereas the Diablo obviously a bassy bass headset. Now tip wise, I like something a bit smoother for the upper mids, like the TANCHJIM Senkais, the regular, the wides. You got the software ultra clears or any of the clear tips. In terms of scaling, the Divine is a mid volume set. It's not going to scale nearly as good as the Diablos. It is going to hover around 65 to 75 dBs depending on the song because of the slight upper mids boost that could be potentially shouty to some people. In conclusion, both the Divine and the Diablos will satisfy the demographic that it is going for. It's just that I think it is slightly pricey. I would just wait for it to be like 10-15% off, because again, performance wise, you can get better stuff like the Super Mix 4, the NORA Chopin at 150, and then if you go lower to around 100, you can get the EA500LM, the EM6L. Even the Divine is gonna like sit around the same technical level as the Divine. So good, solid, but I would wait for them to go on sale. Then for our last 700Hz IEM, we have the ELUA Ultras. These are a meta inspired tuning. It has a sub bass focus, slight V shape. You get good dynamics in the treble, but the upper mids are also smooth and not shouty. So it's a pretty fun all-rounder. It's basically the Defiant if it had a little bit more bass and a little bit more treble, but a third of the cost. Technical performance wise, the ELUA Ultras are slightly better than the Clean, not as smooth and I guess you can say refined and warm as the Clean, but overall, if you want a little bit more liveliness, a little bit more, you know, sharpness, better transients, better dynamic, then the Ultras would be like the better pick over the Cleans. So yeah, for the price, even before going on sale, I would still recommend the ELUA Ultras, a good side grade from the smoother and warmer Clean while having a slight bump in the technicalities compared to the Clean. So overall, pretty fun set. Go give these a shot. Moving on, we got the KIWIEARS BELLE. These are, I believe, around $50 to $60. Don't quote me, but they are incredibly smooth. They are bassy, warm, but the treble, the upper mids, basically no peaks when it comes to high end. Now, when it comes to technical performance, the BELLEs aren't gonna pop out any treble. The vocals, they're all just gonna be very smooth, very tame. It's not gonna hurt your ears. The main focus is in the low end, and the low end is very impactful. You get that thickness, the bassiness, the rumble. It basically reminds me of the Diablos in a way, but with more vocal pop. Compared to other sets at around its price, like the KZ Zenith, even the ELUA Ultras, you know, the Clean, those are all gonna be technically better than the BELLEs because it just doesn't have that like wow factor in the treble. The separation can also take a slight hit because of the amount of low end. So value wise, I wouldn't say these are the best value, but when it comes to being a warm, bassy, thick, and very smooth sounding IEM, not a lot of IEMs are as smooth as the BELLEs. Even the 4Us, for example, isn't as smooth. Overall, the BELLEs are still a solid release, but it's just that the extra mid bass, the extra low end can hurt the transients and the details given how smoothed out the treble and the upper mids are. So if you want something technical, look for the ELUA Ultra, look for like something else around its price range. But if you're okay with like a very warm, bassy, you know, thick, good scaling, and very smooth, you know, IEM, then the BELLEs would be a solid option, but I would just wait for these to go on sale. Moving on, we got the NICEHCK Rockies, and these are going right to top tier. You're not gonna find an EST set that is this well done. Only real nitpick I have is that the bass, it's a little bit tame, it's a little bit light for me personally. The texture is not as good as some of the other stuff at around its price range, for example the Oracle Mark IIIs, and even the Top Pros feel better textured when it comes to the rumble and the overall resolution in the low end. So that is the main, I guess, downside of the Rockies. But aside from that, if you're looking for a set that's just like very technical and you want to try ESTs, these are fantastic for the price. The build, the accessories are also very good. The case, the cable, the unboxing, all just very solid, and it's just a top tier IEM. After the Rockies, we have the SOFTEARS RS5 Mark IIs. These are a slight V shape, very bassy IEM. I would say more mid-bass centric. Slams very hard. You still get the extension in the vocals and the treble. The main nitpick I have with the RS5 Mark IIs is not the sound. It's just the price is a little bit too high for a 5BA set. Like, you can get the Rockies, it has ESTs for 500. This is like 700 bucks. So when it comes to value proposition and technical performance, the RS5 Mark II definitely needs to go on a steep sale. I would say at least 25% off. Like if these go around 500, like 400 bucks, okay, 400 probably not gonna happen. So let's just say around 500 bucks. If you can find these new for around 500, I would say go for it. It is a very fun bassy all-rounder, a side grade to the Theaudio Origins, but it's just that for the price that it's asking for, it's just not worth that much at 700. Moving on, we got the ZIIGAAT Odyssey 2s. These are a neutral, balanced, clean all-rounder sound. They are pretty smooth, and it's basically the CRIN Daybreaks but with better accessories, better plating, and better low-end texture and slight bump in resolution. Now, value-wise, both the Daybreaks and the EPZ P50s are going to be better when it comes to the bang for the buck because they are very similar in the overall tuning, but you're paying $250 for the Odyssey 2s on sale, maybe 200, you know, max, and then you're paying 135 for the Daybreaks, which is almost like $70 cheaper. So value proposition wise, obviously the Daybreaks are better. However, if you are willing to spend a little bit more for that better bass texture and the better plating, then the Odyssey 2s are still solid when it goes on sale. It's just that without the sale, I don't think I can blind recommend it because the Daybreaks and the EPZ P50s exist for like a lot cheaper, not a lot cheaper, but for a good amount cheaper. Next, we got the ZIIGAAT Horizons, and these are going right to top tier. These are basically a mini Zen's Top Pro. You're getting 90% of the performance of the Top Pros, but for like $200 cheaper. Like, it is a very good deal that you're getting. The only real nitpick is that the bass texture, the bass impact could be better, but again, you're not buying it for the bass, you're buying for the technicalities and the bright, you know, slightly sparkly treble presentation. But speaking of slightly bright and sparkly treble, we have the EG280s. These are an all-rounder sound with a slightly bright upper mids and treble tilt. These are very technical for the price. Basically a slightly brighter version of the EW300 and less bright version of the EA 500 LM, so it kind of sits in between the LM and the EW300. When it comes to technical performance, the EG280 is at the top of its price segment at around $70 to $80, slightly more technical than the EW300, which was already pretty technical. So value wise, you're not going to go wrong with the EG280s. The only main issue I can find people running into is that the upper mids might be a bit bright on more energetic songs like K-pop, J-pop, even some pop stuff, even some rock stuff might be a bit too forward in the vocals. So I would watch out for that. But that also means that it's just very sweet, angelic when it comes to female artists, you know, R&B, ballads, the slower pop stuff. These sound very good on those. Overall, I would easily recommend these and I would put them in top tier. Next, we got the LETSHUOER S12 Ultras, and these are a very dynamic, fun, bassy, but still has enough energy and liveliness in the treble. These are probably the smoothest S12 that LETSHUOER made so far. Overall, it's just a very enjoyable set. The performance is also pretty decent. I wouldn't say it's a value monster like the Super Mix 4. They fall around the same technical prowess as the EG280s, which, you know, I guess just shows how good the EG280s are because the S12 Ultra is not a slouch by any means. So overall value, I would say it's good, but I would also wait for these to go on sale. So I'm gonna put it into solid, but wait for it to go on sale. After the Ultras, we have its younger brother, the D02s. These are a neutral, clean, vocal-centric, I guess you can say monitor-like set. They remind me of the TANCHJIM Force, very vocal forward, as well as the Tangzu 1R Studios, which is a lot cheaper than this. I think the studios are like less than $20 on sale. This is 50 to like, I guess like 30 to 20 if you're lucky. Now at around 40 to $50, you have a lot of options here. You got the KZ Zenith. You also have the Tangzu Yushenji if you want a sweeter, airier, still vocal centric, clean sound. It's comfier, the fit is better, the build is better, overall accessories are better. There are just a lot of options at around its price range. And then if you go down to like $20, you have the Tangzu Studios, which is basically the same sound for like half the price. So I would probably skip these unless you can find them on a heavy discount. Moving on, we have the KINERA YAKSHA. These are very similar to the 7Hz Clinical Divine. Basically, these are a bassier version of the Divine, but not as bassy as the Diablos. So it's more all-rounded, not as, I guess you can say, vocal-centric in the overall sound. The bass texture is better on the YAKSHA, but overall, I do prefer the Divine a little bit better than this. I would probably skip these because if you want an all-rounder sound, the Super Mix 4, the Chopin Nova, all going to be better than the YAKSHA, which is what the YAKSHA is going for. It's more all-rounded, less clean, and vocal-centric like the Divine. So for me, probably a skip. Next, we got the DUNU Koto Ito. This is a very V-shaped, aggressive bass head sound. I don't know if I would spend like close to 200 for this. Maybe 100, 150 because it is very in your face with the sound. Like if you want a bass headset, I like the Deuce personally better than this because you can scale it a lot more, less fatiguing in the upper mids. With scaling, as you crank it up, the Deuce's sub bass really comes to life. Whereas this is more V-shaped. It's good, it's fun. If you want an aggressive V-shaped sound that is not too energetic when it comes to the treble, but you still get enough pop in the vocals, then these are, I think they're okay if you can find them on sale, but I do like the Diablos better for a bass headset, and also like the Deuce better, as well as the Martellos and the HBB Punch as a bass headset. So if you can find these for a good deal on sale, I would say go for it. Why not if you like a very aggressive V-shaped bass head sound. Moving on, we have the INAWAKEN TWILIGHT DS. These are a vocal-centric all-rounder sound. The vocals are very forward. It could be a little bit shouty to a lot of people because it has even more forwardness than Harman. So if you found Harman to be a little bit shouty and forward, you're gonna find this to be even more shouty and forward. Performance-wise, it is very good, but at $350, there are just a lot of options at this price. Like I would even take the Super Mix 4, the Nova, the Chopin over this. So probably a skip unless you can find these for a heavy discount. Moving on, we have the TANCHJIM NORA. This is basically a mini SOFTEARS Twilight, but without the soundstage and slightly less technical. So when it comes to value proposition, this is very good. It's like the warmest out of the Fissions, the Origins, and the 4Us of the world. It is pretty enjoyable for male vocals. The difference isn't huge. If you already have the Fission, if you already have, you know, the 4U or the Origin, I think this is pretty redundant. You don't really get this. But if you're looking for a good all-rounder, slightly, you know, leaning towards male vocals, slightly warm, good bass texture, full, natural, smooth, a very enjoyable set overall, these would be a solid price. Also, nobody should be buying the TANCHJIM Origin or the Origin Manor. These are basically the same IEMs. You're not really paying in premium from anything extra, maybe like better accessories, but at that price, like I'll just buy the accessories on its own and just get the NORA, get the Fission, get it for you. Next, we got the MOONDROP LAN 2 pop and reference. Versus the original LAN, the LAN 2s are going to be slightly more all-rounded, bassier, less vocal-centric. The pop version is the most bassy one out of the bunch, and then the reference is neutral, but not as vocal-centric as the original LAN. If you want a bassy, all-rounder sound, go for the pop. If you want a clean, neutral, not that much bass boost, go for the reference. Value-wise, these are not the best because again, you can get similar performance for half the price with the Warner Studios, you know, the Bunny DSP, right? And then at the price, you got the KZZNF with a better driver. You have the Tangzu Yushuanji that is more airy, more unique. So these don't do anything wrong. They don't do anything special. They're just another MOONDROP release that you can buy or not. Personally, I would wait for these to go on sale for at least like 25% off because stock price, it is a bit pricey in my opinion. But if you can find these for like 30 bucks, 35, go for it. Why not? Now, as for the Marigolds, I would probably skip on these because these are like $40 and they are a neutral set when you can get the Wanars for 20 bucks. It's a similar story as the LETSHUOER D02. Like, why would you buy this when there's cheaper stuff that does the same thing for like half the price of what you are offering, right? Now, sound aside, if you're using these for calls, for gaming, if you use the mic a lot, these would actually be a pretty good pick because the mic quality is actually pretty good. They're using some form of noise cancelling with the DSP, but it doesn't have a detachable cable, which I guess makes sense because of the DSP. So if you're getting this for audio, for quality in the music, probably find something else. If you're using this for the mic, I would say give these a shot. They're pretty solid when it comes to the mic. Next, we got a very hype set, the new kid on the block. We got the U9 Tri, and I'm just gonna say it, these are a little bit overhyped. Now, don't get me wrong, these are a pretty solid sounding set, but they're basically a more mid-bass centric version of the Yang Cannon Pros. I don't quite get the hype behind it, but if you're looking for a neutral balanced set and you want better scaling than the Pilgrim, you want more mid-bass than the Canon Pros, but you still want a, you know, pretty neutral and balanced sounding IEM, then these would be an alternative to the other two. Value-wise, some people have been saying these are kilobuck killers. These are not kilobuck killers by any means. That would be the Australis, obviously. Jokes aside, okay, these sit around the Pilgrim, the Dust, the Super Mix 4 level when it comes to technical performance. The only main advantage it has over the others is that it does scale better, so you know, you're gonna get a more immersive sound and I guess more musical sound compared to those. So I can see the selling point, but I wouldn't say this is a kilobuck killer. I would personally wait for these to go on sale because at 400, I do think they are a little bit pricey. Maybe at around 300, give these a shot. These are pretty solid overall. And then lastly, we have the AFUL Dawn X, the flagship from AFUL, and these are pretty solid. If you want a sub-bass focus set that is slightly warm, bassy, very smooth in the treble and the upper mids, pretty good soundstage, pretty good scaling, good for hip-hop, good for rock, good for rap, these would do the job for that. Now, when it comes to the wow factor in the treble, the detail, micro nuances, or like being a very vocal-centric set, it is not any of those. I wouldn't say it is super technical for the price, but it's not slouch either. Like, it's competitive enough. You buy this if you want a smooth, scaling, bassy sound. Personally, I still like the Monarchs better in terms of value, and even the Glaciers, I would say, is a more wow factor when it comes to vocals. These are just very bassy, warm, and smooth. That aside, I hope this speedrun was helpful. Let me know if you guys bought any Iems. It's 1111, and if you need more info on the Divine and the Diablos, I made a written review on Reddit, so go check that out. But aside from that, thanks for watching, and I will see everyone in the next one.
Shout out to Dom Q, Rox Cat, B Urak, Disco Scaldus, Walker Standard, Patrick, User, Contain Guava Juice Gains, Mr. Gorillas, Polly J, Gis Sang Young, Christopher Jackson, Henry Claudia, Son of a Horse, 777 ZK, Wizard, Obi, Treble Extended, Frickalicious, Ricardo, Tapasar, Choco Norris, Shim Bakale, Tomat, FKSRG, Cousin Fat Fat, Julius Phillip, Dead Riddle, Bilha, Nico, Addy, Michael, Trackstar, LL here, Shuri, Ryan, Raphael, I am J-Rack, Ori, June, Hakase, Torcog, Effinadim, EGC, Raj, Chimika, Javier, CB952, Galbog, Senadan, Brian Carson, AK131, MN Gelato, Wayu, Doichi, Mr. Combat, Robotic Sister, Vitor Kedge, Pornpoj, Varaya, Drewski, Edward, Alex, Tuna, Hussein, Brian, Robert, Polar, Marcos, The Surgeon, and Yan Yan. Thank you guys so much for the support.